It's the summer of 1914. Europe is flourishing. Empires are at the height of their power. Technology is advancing faster than ever before. People genuinely believe, like truly believe, that humanity had evolved beyond the need for major wars. And then, everything falls apart. In just 4 years, the world as people knew it would be completely and utterly destroyed. What if I told you that one single moment, one gunshot in a city most people had never even heard of, would trigger a chain reaction so catastrophic it would claim nearly 20 million lives? Sounds unbelievable, right? But that's exactly what happened. Welcome to World War I. A conflict so massive, so brutal, so world-changing that the people who lived through it called it the Great War. They actually believed it would be the last war humanity would ever fight. Spoiler alert, they were dead wrong. Here's the thing most people don't fully grasp about World War I. This wasn't just some old-timey conflict with soldiers marching in neat lines. Nah, this was something completely different, something terrifying, something new. We're talking about 70 million soldiers pulled into the fight. 70 million! That's more than the entire population of most countries today. Farmers, factory workers, teachers, teenagers, ordinary dudes who'd never held a weapon suddenly found themselves in the middle of hell on earth. And the killing wasn't personal anymore. It was industrial. Machine guns mowing down hundreds in seconds. Poison gas choking men in their trenches. Tanks rolling over battlefields like mechanical monsters. Airplanes, which had barely existed a decade earlier, dropping bombs from the sky. War had become a factory of death. Think about that number for a second. Between 16 and 20 million people dead, gone. Fathers who never came home, sons buried in foreign soil, entire villages left with nothing but widows and orphans. And here's what really gets me. These weren't just statistics. Every single one of those deaths was someone's entire world collapsing. But here's where it gets even crazier. The war to end all wars didn't end anything. In fact, it planted seeds for something even worse. The borders drawn after this conflict, still causing problems today. The resentments left behind, they fueled the rise of fascism and led directly to World War II just 2 decades later. The Russian Revolution, the chaos in the Middle East, the ideological battles that defined the 20th century, all of it traces back to decisions made during and after World War I. So, how did this happen? How did a single assassination spiral into global catastrophe? Who were the key players and what were they really fighting for? That's exactly what we're about to uncover. Stick with me, because this story, it's wilder than you could ever imagine. Let's rewind to June 28, 1914. Sarajevo, a sunny summer day, crowds lining the streets. Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary is visiting with his wife, Sophie. It's their wedding anniversary, actually. They're riding in an open-topped car, waving to the people. And somewhere in that crowd stands a skinny 19-year-old kid called Gavrilo Princip. He's nervous, he's got a pistol in his pocket, and he's about to change the entire course of human history. Here's the wild part. Princip wasn't even supposed to get his chance. An earlier assassination attempt that same morning had failed miserably. The assassins basically choked. Princip had given up and wandered off to grab a sandwich. But then, and you seriously can't make this stuff up, the Archduke's driver took a wrong turn. The car stalled right in front of the cafe where Princip was standing. Fate, man. Brutal, twisted fate. Princip stepped forward, raised his pistol, and fired. The Archduke and his wife were dead within the hour. Now, here's what makes this even more heartbreaking. Franz Ferdinand, he was actually one of the good guys, relatively speaking. Unlike many Austro-Hungarian leaders, he wanted to give Slavic peoples more rights, more autonomy. He could have been an ally to the very cause Princip was fighting for. But Princip didn't know that. Or maybe he didn't care. He was a true believer, a member of the Black Hand, a secret society dedicated to liberating South Slavic peoples from Austro-Hungarian rule. When they arrested him, he showed zero remorse. He believed he'd struck a heroic blow for freedom. He was too young for the death penalty, so they gave him 20 years. He died of tuberculosis in prison in 1918, the same year the war finally ended. He never saw the world his actions created. But here's the thing we gotta understand. Princip's bullets didn't cause World War I. They just lit the fuse on a bomb that had been ticking for decades. Historians use this acronym, MAIN, to break down what was really going on beneath the surface. And trust me, once you see how these forces were building, you'll realize war wasn't just possible, it was practically inevitable. Militarism. Europe wasn't just preparing for war, it was obsessed with it. Military spending across the major powers literally doubled between 1870 and 1914. Germany had 4 million trained soldiers ready to go. France made military service mandatory for 3 whole years. And then there was the naval arms race between Britain and Germany. Oh boy. See, Britain was an island nation. Its entire economy, its entire survival depended on controlling the seas. So when Germany started building these massive warships, dreadnoughts they called them, Britain freaked out. Both countries poured insane amounts of money into their navies, each convinced the other was gearing up for attack. The paranoia was real, folks, and it poisoned everything. Alliances. Europe had basically divided itself into 2 armed camps. On one side, you had the Triple Alliance, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. On the other, the Triple Entente, France, Russia, and Britain. These alliances were supposed to prevent war. The logic was simple. Attack one of us, you're attacking all of us. Mutually assured destruction, right? Wrong. What it actually meant was that any tiny conflict could drag the entire continent into war. One domino falls, they all fall. Then there's imperialism. European powers were scrambling to colonize every corner of the globe. Africa, Asia, the Pacific. Everybody wanted their slice of the pie. And when you've got multiple empires competing for the same resources, the same territories, friction is guaranteed. There were multiple close calls in Morocco alone, 1905, 1911. Each time, Europe barely avoided catastrophe. And finally, maybe the most dangerous ingredient, nationalism. Look, national pride can be beautiful. It can unite people, inspire greatness. But in early 20th century Europe, it had become something toxic. Pan-Slavism convinced Russians they had to protect Serbia at all costs. Pan-Germanism dreamed of a greater Germany dominating the continent. France was still bitter about losing Alsace-Lorraine to Germany back in 1871 and wanted revenge. And in empires like Austria-Hungary, which contained dozens of different ethnic groups, nationalism wasn't unifying, it was tearing the whole thing apart. So, when Princip pulled that trigger, all these forces exploded at once. Austria-Hungary blamed Serbia. They issued an ultimatum with demands so extreme, they were basically designed to be rejected. Serbia tried to compromise, but it wasn't enough. On July 28th, Austria-Hungary declared war. Russia mobilized to defend Serbia. Germany saw Russia mobilizing and declared war on them. Then Germany declared war on France and invaded Belgium to get there faster. Britain, who had treaties promising to protect Belgian neutrality, declared war on Germany. 5 weeks. That's all it took. One assassination turned into a continental apocalypse. And here's maybe the craziest detail of all. Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany, Tsar Nicholas II of Russia, and King George V of Britain. They were first cousins, all grandchildren of Queen Victoria. Nicky and Georgie, that's what they called each other, desperately trying to prevent their nations from slaughtering each other. It didn't work. Family ties meant nothing against the machinery of war. And then there's the delusion. Everyone, and I mean everyone, thought it would be quick. German generals planned to crush France in 6 weeks. British volunteers were promised they'd be home by Christmas. Soldiers marched off to war like they were heading to an adventure. Nobody imagined trenches stretching from the English Channel to Switzerland. Nobody imagined years of stalemate. Nobody imagined millions dying over a few miles of mud. They had no idea. So here's where things get truly horrifying. World War I wasn't just a war between armies, it was the first total war. Every factory, every farm, every man, woman, and child became part of the war machine. Government seized control of industries, food was rationed, information was censored. Women flooded into factories by the millions, building the bullets and bombs that their husbands and sons would use or be killed by. The line between soldier and civilian, it basically disappeared. And the weapons? Absolutely nightmarish. Machine guns spitting 400 to 600 rounds per minute. One gun could mow down an entire battalion charging across open ground. Infantry attacks became suicide missions. Artillery caused up to 70% of all casualties. Shells so powerful they turned the landscape into cratered moonscapes, like the surface of some dead planet. Then came poison gas, first used by Germany at Ypres in 1915. Imagine choking on your own burning lungs, clawing at your throat, drowning in chemical death. Tanks, airplanes dropping bombs, submarines hunting merchant ships. War had become an industrial slaughterhouse. The Western Front stretched 440 miles from Belgium to Switzerland, and for 4 brutal years it barely moved. Millions of men lived and died in trenches, not simple ditches, but elaborate underground cities. Frontline trenches, support trenches, reserve trenches, all connected by communication tunnels. German bunkers had electric lighting and concrete walls 30 feet underground. But don't let that fool you. Life in those trenches was pure hell. Flooding, mud so thick it could swallow a man whole, rats, fat, horrible rats feeding on the dead, lice spreading disease, and always the smell of rotting flesh. Soldiers stood guard at dawn and dusk, knowing any moment a sniper's bullet could find them. At night, they crawled into no man's land on terrifying patrols. The battles of 1916. 1916 brought the war's darkest chapters. Verdun. The German plan was literally to bleed France white. For 10 months, both sides threw everything they had into a meat grinder. Combined casualties, around 700,000. The ground gained, practically nothing. Then came the Somme. July 1st, 1916, the bloodiest single day in British military history. Nearly 58,000 British casualties, almost 20,000 dead in one day. Many of those soldiers served in PALS battalions, guys from the same towns, the same factories, the same football clubs who'd enlisted together. When those battalions got wiped out, entire communities back home lost their men. Brothers, fathers, best friends, gone in hours. But this war wasn't confined to France. The Eastern Front stretched 1,000 miles. Russia threw 12 million men into the fight, suffering catastrophic defeats. The Brusilov offensive showed what was possible, then exhausted Russia's last reserves, paving the way for revolution. At Gallipoli, Allied forces tried to knock Turkey out of the war. It became a disaster. Turkish defenders held the high ground, and for 8 bloody months, Allied troops couldn't break through. Over 250,000 Allied casualties. The campaign forged Australian and New Zealand national identities. Anzac Day is still commemorated every April 25th. In the Middle East, British forces captured Jerusalem. The Arab revolt saw guerrilla fighters join the Allied cause, lured by promises of independence. But here's the dirty truth. Britain made contradictory promises to everyone. Arab independence, secret territorial deals with France, a Jewish homeland. These conflicting commitments planted seeds for conflicts that still rage today. The war even reached Africa, where German Colonel Leto Vorbeck fought an incredible guerrilla campaign. His 15,000 troops tied down over 300,000 Allied soldiers. But the real victims were African porters. At least 100,000 died in brutal conditions most history books ignore. Then came 1917, the year that everything changed. Germany gambled on unrestricted submarine warfare, sink everything, starve Britain. It backfired spectacularly. America declared war in April after discovering the Zimmermann telegram, Germany's secret attempt to ally with Mexico against the U.S. Meanwhile, Russia collapsed. Revolution toppled the Tsar. Lenin's Bolsheviks seized power and pulled Russia out entirely. Germany saw one last chance. The spring offensive of 1918 smashed through Allied lines using new stormtrooper tactics. They advanced 40 miles, shattering 4 years of stalemate. But they couldn't sustain it. American troops were arriving at 250,000 per month, fresh, well-supplied, eager to fight. By July, the tide turned. The 100 Days Offensive pushed Germany back. On November 9th, Kaiser Wilhelm abdicated. 2 days later, the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, the guns finally fell silent. How did anyone survive this mentally? Dark humor, unbreakable bonds with fellow soldiers, letters home, poetry. Wilfred Owen wrote verses about gas attacks so vivid they still haunt readers. Siegfried Sassoon went from patriotic volunteer to bitter anti-war protester. Isaac Rosenberg crafted beautiful words, then died in April 1918, just months before peace. But not everyone coped. Shell shock, what we now call PTSD, affected tens of thousands. The British Army recorded 80,000 cases. The real number was certainly higher. Some were treated with rest, others faced electric shocks and humiliation. The British executed 306 of their own soldiers for cowardice, many of them almost certainly suffering from invisible psychological wounds. The war didn't just kill bodies, it shattered minds. When the guns finally stopped, the silence was deafening, but the destruction, it was just beginning to reveal itself. 4 empires, ancient, powerful dynasties that had shaped the world for centuries, crumbled into dust. The German Empire collapsed when revolution forced Kaiser Wilhelm to flee. The Weimar Republic rose from the ashes, born in chaos and humiliation. Austria-Hungary shattered into pieces, ending 600 years of Habsburg rule. The Ottoman Empire was carved up by the victors, its territories handed out like prizes. The map of the world was redrawn, and nobody asked the people living there what they wanted. Here's the thing that blows my mind. We're still living with the consequences of decisions made over a century ago. The Middle East, carved up with zero regard for who actually lived there. Britain and France drew borders that grouped together rival communities and divided peoples who'd coexisted for generations. Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, all created by diplomats who'd never set foot in these lands. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Iraqi sectarian violence, the Syrian civil war, Kurdish struggles for a homeland, all of it traces back to World War I. The Russian Revolution turned a European war into a global ideological battle. Soviet communism emerged from the chaos, challenging capitalism for 70 years. The Cold War, nuclear terror, proxy wars across the globe, all connected to what happened in 1917. And Germany, the Treaty of Versailles crushed them with blame and impossible reparations. It bred resentment so deep, so poisonous, that it gave rise to something even worse. Adolf Hitler served as a corporal in those trenches. The Nazi movement was built on veteran networks and the myth that Germany had been stabbed in the back. Let that sink in. Without World War I, there's no Nazi Party, no Holocaust, no World War II. But it wasn't all destruction. Women had entered the workforce in unprecedented numbers. They'd proven they could do anything men could do, and they demanded recognition. Britain granted women's suffrage in 1918. America followed in 1920. The war accelerated change that might have taken decades. American global power was born. The U.S. went from debtor nation to creditor nation. New York began replacing London as the world's financial capital. The 20th century became the American century. Yet something precious was lost forever. The belief in progress, the confidence that civilization was moving towards something better. That optimism died in the trenches and never fully returned. The lost generation of writers, the rise of modernism, existentialism, all responses to a trauma that shattered faith in humanity itself. So why should you care about a war that ended over 100 years ago? Because we are still living in its shadow. Middle Eastern conflicts, Russian-Ukrainian tensions, the European Union itself, built by leaders desperate to prevent another continental catastrophe. Every major crisis carries echoes of 1914. The war proved something terrifying. Advanced civilizations can destroy themselves. Technology doesn't guarantee progress, it just amplifies whatever we choose to do with it. When the armistice took effect, some soldiers cheered, some wept, many just stood in stunned silence. One British officer wrote that the silence was harder to bear than the noise had been. After years of constant bombardment, the quiet was terrifying. But in that silence, our modern world was born. The old world died in those trenches, and we're still figuring out what to build from the wreckage.